Good morning, and good morning, Tim. Good morning, everybody who is watching us today on July 9th from any part of the world. Tim is in Atami in Japan. I'm in Tokyo, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We are waiting for our guest speaker, John Chesen, to join us, who is having a little bit of technical issues, as it seems. And he will be hopefully with us in a couple of minutes or even less than that. In the meantime, Tim,
We'll put on our tap dance shoes until he comes. And if he doesn't show up, then we're going to just yap away and talk about things. Um, so I met, that's air quotes, John online a few times now. And I wish I had known about him and his business, the beer brewing, microbrewery business, when my nephew Ryan visited Japan last year, because he's like really into craft beer. And, I like craft beer. I'm just not super into it, right? And had I known him at the time, I would have taken him to all of John's locations. Maya, do you remember off the top of your head how many locations John has?
well, I think that they have between 5 and 7 locations here in Tokyo,
Okay.
tap rooms in different parts of the city. And I visited the one in Gutanda, I think,
Okay.
to meet
Utanda,
him
right.
there. Yes.
And I think maybe I might be wrong, but the first one is in Shizuoka here, where I'm at. A lot of people don't think Atami's in Shizuoka. They think
Yes.
we're, Kanagawa. They think we're in Kanagawa, right? Um,
Yeah.
and just like literally the next train stop over, Yugawara, is in Kanagawa. So like we're right on the edge, but we're Shizuoka. So he even has a place in Shizuoka, at least one, I think.
In
Um,
Hamamatsu, yes, yes.
yeah. So he's a really laid back guy, but he's also a very he's done well here. I think he's been here like 20 years, and more proof that people can make it here. And sometimes there are barriers. Being a foreigner can be a barrier, not intentionally necessarily, but it can. There's the language issue, the culture issue. Having connections or not having connections. But some people figure out how to overcome those barriers and actually turn them into advantages. And so he's someone who did it, and he's so laid back, right? He's a really easy guy to talk to. And hopefully he'll be joining us soon. Again, technical difficulties. Um, and then the other thing John was kind enough to do. So Maya and I did like a beta group for a couple seminars we put together. Intercultural communication related seminars. And John was kind enough to attend, and he gave us wonderful feedback. And we had a great time. It was a really good group of people. So a little plug for us in the future, right? We did a
Yes.
no nonsense, practical, anybody can understand. You don't have to be an academic or hey, John is here. Thank goodness. We were tap dancing, but we said lots of nice things about you.
Oh,
So
thank you
welcome.
very much. I'm sorry to be late.
That's all right.
I've
It
been
Well,
happens.
the
scrambling
most,
with browsers
right.
I
and
know it's a
different
pain.
devices. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
The most important thing is that we solved the issue and you're
you
now
solved
with,
it.
and very welcome to the
Yeah,
podcast, John.
yeah,
Yes.
thank you for having me.
yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure. We were just telling people about the focus group we had about, who helped us actually with feedback about the courses we are developing now, the cross-cultural communication and customer
Yeah. So we
service.
appreciate you helping us out. A
Thank you so
veteran
very much.
who
Yeah.
knows it, so
I
we
really
appreciate it.
enjoyed those, and I think they're gonna, bring a lot of insight and value to people who, sincerely want to make a difference, but encounter cultural difference.
Right on.
Yes.
But that's
And
not what we're talking about today. We're here to promote you and
yes.
what you're doing and tell us your story. Introduce yourself, your Japan story, and kind of let everybody know what you're doing.
Yeah, I was thinking about how to do this. I guess like you, I'm a long time Japan hand. And the
Yes.
most concise title for me, business-wise, is that I'm one of 3 managing partners for the Baird Brewing Company, which this month actually is celebrating its 25th anniversary. We were
That's great.
founded.
Congratulations on that. Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
We were founded in Numazu, at the top of the Izu Peninsula, by Brian and Sayuri Baird. And I was their first investor, and every month or so, their customer at the tap room. At the time, I was living in Tokyo. And so for the first 10 years of the business, up until 2010, I was working in another industry, but was following very much as a friend and also an investor. Yeah, that's sort of the brief introduction, and we can get into my life and how I got to Japan and all that.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think it's always an interesting story.
Yes, it is always an interesting story because, as Tim always says, we come to Japan for different reasons. Some of them are similar, some of them are very different, and still we all experience Japan in a different way. And so let's start with the question, why did you come to Japan? I think this is the question which I asked you when we met at the tap room, right? The first time you and I met in person. Yes.
Yeah, there's sort of a big logical reason, and then there's just one of these contingencies or lucky things that happens in life. I suppose the big reason was that I was from a young age interested in international work. My father had been in the Foreign Service, and before that, my parents met in the International Students Club at Marquette University. So they sort of selected into that and met each other there. And then my father pursued his career entering the Foreign Service. He left before I was born. My sister was born in Quito, Ecuador. But even after that, he continued in international work. And in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, we really from around the age of 10, we had exchange students continuously from pretty much every country, including over the years a handful from Japan. The first was from Iran. And,
You're right.
and this was right in the period where, the revolution was getting underway, and he never was able to go back to Iran. He's an American citizen now living in California. But, just dozens and dozens of people. And then later researchers from Carnegie Institute, which was close to our house. So that had a big impact on me. My parents, their friends, and the people who we were, really blessed to welcome to our home in Washington. My 2 siblings didn't catch the bug. They're more sort of domestically oriented, but doing wonderful things in their careers. I did, and after college, I had studied French. That was my minor in college, and I wanted to be involved somehow with France. And I went to the French embassy, and I got a list of all the companies in the DC area, and I faxed them all, and ended up getting work, part-time work with Electricity of France. They had an office in DC. But I supplemented that at the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars, which was part of the Smithsonian Institute, and existed until this year. Sadly, it was just shut by the current administration. But they welcome scholars from all over America and all over the world. I was going through the project book there with the director, and there wasn't at the time a scholar from France, but there was one from Japan. And Japan was in the news then. Japan is #1. We're worried about Japan.
Right.
on and on. And I said, I know Japan's sort of in discussion in the news, but I don't really have much knowledge or experience at all. So I chose to work with a scholar from Tokyo University, Watanabe Akio sensei. And he was in DC to research a book on immediate post-war U.S.-Japan relations and the U.S.'s initial moves to set up an alliance system as the Cold War began in Asia. And he was taking advantage of archives. He was doing archival research at the National Archives, using books and other materials from the Library of Congress and other institutions in DC. And I was sort of his gopher. Copied stuff, went to get books, helped out. And in our discussions, he was very generous. He would take a napkin and write kanji and stuff. And so I gradually became interested in Japan. And I remember at Christmas time, during high school and university, I had worked at a seafood market in DC. And I remember taking a whole Norwegian salmon to his home in Bethesda, Maryland. And his wife and kids one child were delighted, and they enjoyed it. And that sort of deepened the friendship. After he got back to Tokyo, about 5 months later, I got this lovely washi Japanese card in the mail. And there was a check for $500. And he said, look, I had some grant money left over. I wanted you to have this.
Oh, how sweet.
So I said, I'm going to use this to study Japanese. And at one of those wonderful, unique DC institutions, the Department of Agriculture Graduate School, I started studying Japanese one night a week.
Nice.
Well, that's such a beautiful story, yes.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I knew from having studied French that you can't really progress unless you go to that country. So I applied for the JET program. And in 1989, went to Hyogo Prefecture, Nishiakashi near Kobe. And taught there at 3 different high schools for a year. And just again, was very fortunate to make wonderful friends and have a great experience. And I didn't really want to keep teaching, but I did want to stay involved with Japan. So I went back and gradually got myself into graduate school at Johns Hopkins University, the School of Advanced International Studies, called SAIS. And my classmate there was Brian Baird.
Wow.
That's where it all began.
That's how the dots become.
It's amazing. Yeah.
You
said that they connect backwards, the dots.
Yeah. Within a week, we were at a venerable pub in DC called the Brickskeller, and having beers and bonding in what's become a lifelong friendship.
Nice. And what strikes me, first of all, I don't know, I'm not sure the word sheltered is the right word, but because I lived a rough life growing up on the north side of Chicago, but I was kind of isolated from the rest of the world, right? And I did not have the exposure you had at a young age to people from different cultures, ethnicities. So in that sense, I was a late bloomer. But when I did come to Japan, again, I always say this, against my will, the Navy sent me here. I was so naive in the ways of the world that I was shocked to see that Japanese people loved rock and roll, and they loved the blues, and they told funny jokes that made us all laugh. I mean, these were like, it just instantly humanized them, because I had this stereotypical view that the media paints either purposely or not on purpose, whatever, but you get it. And I just remember my head, in a good way, kind of exploding, like, oh my goodness, and I wasn't saying this to myself, but it was almost like, wow, they're human. They're just like me,
Yeah.
Again, it was so naive, but the power of just meeting people and making a friend and talking and going through experiences together changes everything. And it could be even within your culture, you know. Um, Growing up in a white neighborhood, my son became best friends with a black kid. I got to know his family, and it changed me. I saw this new perspective. It's a different culture, you know, a subculture within the U.S. But I had the same reaction. Oh my, they're so loving. I just love this family, and you know, so that's what I see with you. But you had it from a really young age, and I think you were very lucky, and you had very good parents for promoting that to you from the very start. So hats off to you, and it's no surprise that you've done well here. So just my 2 cents.
Well, I do feel fortunate that my parents created that environment for us and those opportunities. And it really is, as you point out, this interaction between, sort of things that just happen in your life, whether it's in your neighborhood in Chicago or mine in DC, and then being open once you experience that, saying,
Yeah. You know,
wait a second, this is so interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I want to learn more. I kind of want to continue the conversation. I want to maybe go there.
right.
yeah, it's fascinating because I also remember when I was a child back home, there was a national children's movement. And of course, that was created by the party in power at that time. And they were, what do they call them? International events every year. And they would call kids from all over the world so that children from Bulgaria, they could communicate, they could play, they could perform with those children from other parts of the world. And I think that everybody, especially people from my generation and people from the generation before me, those who participated there, they have a different perspective. So even though we grew up in a small continent where there are so many other nationalities, such events are still very important for young children to understand that you just need to reach out. You just need to start playing, right?
Yes.
Or say a word,
And
even
kids are
Yeah.
though
naturals.
they're
Kids will
very
do
nice.
it
Yeah,
naturally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's formative then, and you only see it sometimes several years later. And
Yes, you're not
and
aware of what is
but man,
happening to you at that point, right?
yeah,
Yeah. I feel like my wife and I stumbled onto this profound truth. Okay. So I've mentioned several times before, we used to hostFtoko, Japanese kids who don't want to go to school, troubled kids, right? In Hawaii. And we put them into the local charter school. We had an agreement with them. And we said, you don't have to study. Just make friends, play, have fun. And some of these kids are 12, 13, 14, right? And they had no motivation for anything. Well, they did, but nobody ever asked them, you know, and their motivations were a little bit different than maybe what the Japanese school system thought they should be motivated by, right? And we just said, make friends. That was kind of our thing, our mantra. And they made friends.
yeah,
One, because Japan is so popular now. Everybody loves Japan, especially Hawaii. They absolutely love Japan. So these kids make friends and suddenly they're motivated to want to learn English. Oh my goodness, go figure.
yeah,
And it's just this simple, profound truth, you know. And in my case, I was 19. I wanted to talk to the pretty girls. That was my motivation. That was very shallow, but it evolved into, oh, now I
powerful
have
motivation.
friends. Yeah, it's simple. You know, I was an idiot, you know, but that's okay. You got to start somewhere, right? Um, so again, getting these kids together at a young age is so formative because it makes an impression, and I think it's a good impression that I think it is sustainable throughout your life. So
Yeah, I think that a big insight there, well, two maybe. One is just getting out there, just go, just play, just make friends. And what does that trigger in many cases? It triggers this internal motivation.
where it
Yes.
Whereas,
has to come from, it can't come from outside. Otherwise, it's
yeah,
not sustainable. Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
and then what's
And
really amazing is seeing kids take off after that.
And we had a few that took off. You know, they just needed to find. You know, Our most successful story is this kid comes and his mom is very like a high-powered executive. Like she has her own company, right? And she's busy all the time. And she sends him to us. She's like exasperated, like, I don't know what to do. And so he comes, he didn't want to come. Like the first day we met. And then every night we just started talking to him and we make dinner and just talk. And he started telling us how much he loved movies, Hollywood movies. And then eventually he came, he said, I wish I could learn to be a director. Right? And he made some friends at this charter school. And 3 weeks later, he didn't want to go back. He wanted to stay. And like a couple of days after he goes back, his mother sends us this letter. What did you do to my son? He's a different person. He wants to go back to school. And now he wants to be an exchange student. And he asked me to get him into this school because they have a deal with Canada, an exchange program with Canada. He's like a different person. And all it took was just talking to him, listening to him, feeding some of those dreams. You can do this, right?
Yeah,
Ended up
that's
moving.
brilliant.
He ended up moving. That's our most dramatic one, right? So his mom was she was so surprised, but so grateful. We felt good. I mean, what's better than that? Like I can't think of a better feeling than seeing that, right?
That's brilliant. Are you still working with you?
No, we're in Japan now. So this is when we were in Hawaii. So, it doesn't work out now. We're busy taking care of our mom, my mom, my mother-in-law and stuff like that. But it was a most rewarding. And that's why Maya and we got some guests coming up in the future, but we support people who support the youth, and especially the youth of Japan. They need a little bit of love, man. They need some love and they need some friends, right? So we support that. But again, your background is, wow, what a great background. You had great parents. You were very, very fortunate. And we're glad to have you. Japan is benefiting from it.
Yes.
It's almost, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it. I'm 59 and I've been here 25 years, so almost half my life now in Japan. And it's been a really wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Lots of different chapters. But,
Yeah.
So tell us about your brewery business. I'm really interested in that. And maybe, did you want to go through some of your pictures and slides?
Yeah, we absolutely can. So this is the brewery. This building is now 11 years old. We moved from Numazu at the top western side of the Izu Peninsula 11 years ago, and on a greenfield site built this brewery. And this was really Brian's inspiration. He said at some point, I want to go back in time. Most of us want to kind of thrust forward into the bright, shining future. So we moved to a very agricultural part of Izu City. And his thinking there was that historically, hundreds of years ago, brewing was really a side activity associated deeply with agriculture. So there would be grain harvested, and then some amount of it might be, malted and used right there close to the fields to make beer. And so that was sort of the vision, was to go back into a rural area and to have the world's most beautiful country brewery. I think we were very impressed with wineries and distilleries, some of which are in these just idyllic settings. Breweries, including our first one, craft breweries, were often in industrial parks for a lot of reasons, and most of them very, very good reasons. But if you were fortunate enough to be able to expand and build a brewery, well, maybe go back into the countryside and build a beautiful country brewery. So that was the goal here. This is one part of it that we're seeing. Here's another. I didn't include any of it.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And this is total ignorance on my part. So when you decide to build in a certain location, how important, like you analyze the population, the demographics of potential customers that can come there? And did you have like benchmarks to say, okay, we'll have enough, we can get enough people in to sustain this business?
I would say that that's the standard and well-tested and efficacious way of doing it.
Okay.
And I would truthfully, I have to admit that wasn't really a part of the analysis.
Okay.
It was more of a dream. So
Gotcha.
a field of dreams type brewery.
But it worked.
It's, people have gradually and in larger and larger numbers found the place, told each other about it over time. Obviously, the internet and social media has helped, and so little by little, we've gotten a good amount of visitors to the brewery.
Okay.
And this building that we're looking at now was built on what had been a campground. Tim, did you ever go to the KOA campground in America?
KOA? I don't think so, no.
It was this big chain of sort of camping light campgrounds where they would have, areas for RVs, and they would have a lodge with pinball machines for the kids, maybe even a pool. So it was sort of camping, but it was sort of like being in a motel or a hotel or something.
Okay.
Anyway, someone fell in love with KOA and built Japan's only ever KOA campground on this very site.
Oh, right.
And for whatever reason, it didn't last. And, it was starting to go back to nature, but we found the land. We were introduced by Izu City. And so we tore down the remnants of the lodge and built this brewery. But around it, there was a campground. And 3 or 4 years in, we crowdfunded, and we restored the campground in 3 different sort of stages. So now there's Camp Baird around the campground, and it's just beautiful. Right to the right of the camper in green you see there right to the left of her is the Kano River. And so it sort of comes to it's bending around right at this point, and it's just lovely. And on a starry night in Shuzenji, that you can see 1 million stars, and you can just be out there with your campfire and a few beers and your friends. And so that's been a really nice part of being at that location as well.
Nice.
So it's a nice environment.
Did you ever consider like having live music, live venues, or do you ever do that?
Yeah, we have had a couple times a year. We have a fest. One is at the end of October, a Harvest Fest. And then we do a brewery anniversary celebration in June every year. And we usually have live music then, either on the 3rd floor, which we cycled through a little bit, or out on the grounds. So this is on the grounds.
Okay, let me get that one again. Sorry, this one.
So this is the campground also. And there were cabins left over from the KOA era. And we refurbished a bunch of them so that folks can stay there. 6, if you have small kids, up to 8 in a cabin. And then this one we converted into a little, on the left-hand side, a little kitchen, simple foods. And on the right-hand side, 11 taps for draft beer.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Oh, now I want to go there. Wow.
Me too. I want to go there.
How far a drive is that from Atami?
From Atami, not far. I would say with
40 minutes,
an hour, maybe.
An hour? Okay.
Yeah, if depending on the traffic, you might be an hour and 15 minutes, but not far at all. You're
Except
close.
I can't drink your beer if I drive there, so I need a designated driver. That's the killer. The kicker.
Or you can stay overnight.
That's another one. So if you ever need live acts, I have friends who are pros and they're really good. So
Yeah, so yeah, we do have live music periodically. One thing we've never done, although we've had it as an idea for a long time in a contingency in case of rain, is, and I don't have a picture here, but to put a band in the fermentation cellar. So on the right-hand side, you would have all these, 6 and 12,000 liter shiny fermentation tanks,
yeah.
and the welded pipes that go to and from them, and then an open floor, and then we would put the band there, and we would sort of seal off the tank area so that there's no, beer disaster with thousands of liters of beer flooding the hall. But in that, we've often thought it'd be really cool to have a live show in the fermentation cellar. So maybe we'll be able to do that.
What kind of music do you like for these live events?
Oh, just rock and roll music of various sorts. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Right. Nice.
And we're very much local in spirit. So one group that's played with us for years, and they always come out from Numazu. The daughter is really into hula. So
my friends play hula music.
Yeah, so we're completely open to all sorts of music and dance. We recently had
island reggae hula.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, if you ever let me know, I'll set up. They make the rounds a lot. Sometimes they play here in Atami. I get them gigs here at a couple of venues we have, so it's always fun. They're my old friend. He used to be my roommate when I was in college. So I lived with the guy for 4.5 years during the wild time of my life when I was young and single.
Oh, fantastic.
You wanted to study Japanese at that time very much.
Me, of course, yes, yeah.
No, that's the time. I'm just referring to what you said in the beginning of the podcast today.
Exactly, and they were rock and rollers. They were almost pretty. They were big enough to open for YMO at the Budokan, their original band. So, and they toured around the world, and I had to fill in as a roadie one time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but one of the roadies got sick, so I had a blast. We did Osaka,
carrying amps and speakers and cords and
all of that, and I just did what I was told because I had no idea. I just carried. I was the gopher. I did all the gopher stuff, right? I tried to contribute, but it was my first taste of the subcultures in Japan, and I always tell people, so for the first time in my life, I saw these guys from backstage. I always went to their concerts to support my friend, right? But now I'm with the band, the roadie, and so I'm looking from the backstage. So I'm looking at the audience, right? And it was just so funny because we started off in Tokyo, that's what I was used to, right? And Tokyo still, even the rock and rollers are going like this in unison, And then we go to Osaka. I'm behind the stage, and Osaka people were like, Wah! They were like Americans, It was so funny. It was like, am I in a different world? Is this a different country? And I mean it in a really good way. They were just wild and less inhibited, and then we went to Kyoto and things got soft again. And then Kanazawa has its own little funky thing. We went there, But I had the time. I was like 21, 22 maybe. Oh, man.
That's a great way to travel and to experience Japan.
I had so much fun. I'll never forget those memories. It was a blast, right? But and I was learning Japanese, and among many other things I was learning.
You will learn a lot that way, frankly. It's just getting out there again.
Right.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So yeah, do you have other locations now that maybe a lot of, I'm guessing, listeners in Japan are many of them in Tokyo, Maya, would you say?
Yes, many are in Tokyo, some are out of Japan too, and we've got some listeners in the Kansai area as well.
Okay.
Well, yes, thanks for asking. We do. We have tap rooms. So in the early days in Numazu, the business plan was really around a brew pub. It was a tiny brewery, 30-liter capacity, made out of rewelded Budweiser kegs. And the business plan that Brian wrote, and it was a sensible one based on what he had seen in communities in America, was that within sort of a 2 or 3 mile radius, that was your customer base. And so he and Sayudi went into business at the Fish Market Tap Room at the port in Numazu. And really, especially on weekdays, no one came at all.
Mm-hmm.
The business plan wasn't working. But on weekends and holidays, people were coming. And they started asking, so are you from, which part of Numazu are you from? Did you walk over? Oh, no. We heard about Baird Beer. We heard about you on a chat group. The early, chat group era on the internet. And we like beer, and we heard about you doing this foreigner making ales and in Numazu. So we came, and so the big insight there was that if we, that the business wasn't going to survive in Numazu alone, we had to go where the customers were. And so the first tap room established 17, 18 years ago was at, and remains today at Nakameguro in Tokyo.
Okay. I am not sure I have a picture of Nakameguro. We've got this one here.
This is the one we're looking at now is the second tap room. It was just a year later. And this one is at Harajuku.
Great.
Harajuku. Oh,
Yeah.
I used to go there a lot.
Great
And
locations, yeah.
This one
Nakameguro
is
very-
fascinating
Yeah.
because this has been a wonderful tap room for us. It's a very it's our first sort of izakaya type tap room where it feels really Japanese as well, and the food there is yakitori. But this is just 50 meters off of Takeshita Dori, and so again, from a business analysis standpoint, one could say, wait a second, none of the people walking up and down Takeshita Dori are your customers. They're all 13-year-old girls. And
good point.
but here, just off of that, you have all of these design studios and other interesting little businesses. And that was our early clientele, people working in those creative fields in the neighborhood. And then gradually, again, word got out, further afield, and others started coming to the tap room. It's just a 2-minute walk from Harajuku station on the JR, on the Yamanote line. So this has been a wonderful tap room for us as well.
Hey, if you ever plan to build one in Jiugaoka, let me know. I used to go to Harajuku a lot because my son lived there, but he moved to Jiugaoka. So, I definitely want you to build one there. I'm rooting for it because then I'll go.
Thank you. The Toyoko line is really kind of was an anchor for us early on. When we first came back to Tokyo, Brian was living in Gakuge Daigaku, and I came back. This is after grad school, after SAIS, a couple months later, and I didn't really know much about Tokyo at all. And so I think I spent a couple of weeks with him, and then I got an apartment in Gakuge Daigaku. And I lived there for 4 years and then 5 years at the neighboring station in Toritsudai. And so it was logical for us then, and we were comfortable with that area. So it's no accident that the first tap room was at Nakameguro.
Yeah.
And then Harajuku became an easy step out. Later on, this was 2011, Bashamichi, which is also on the Toyoko line. That's right. We have a tap room there in Yokohama. So there's 4 tap rooms now in Tokyo.
Nice.
1 in Yokohama. And for Kansai listeners, we have base station Kansai at Tenma. in Osaka.
Oh, nice.
So, which is a really characterful neighborhood. Lots of little alleys and
Yeah, I love
little
those.
restaurants and little bars. It's just a
How long
fun
has
area.
that been there? That
We opened that. The timing wasn't great. We opened that just as COVID was starting.
Oh, yeah.
And so we sort of, limped through that
Yeah.
with guidance and help from the Osaka government. But that's still going. So that one has a retail license, a takeout license as well. So we have a big fridge for takeout. We do a little oroshi or wholesale business out of there as well.
Okay.
So it's got a beautiful bar, all the taps, the takeout, and then our manager there is also gradually making his way through Tenma and creating new customer relationships. So, this or that restaurant might call up and say, we just need 3 bottles today or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they might come down and pick them up, or he might deliver them. So it's this nice little, network growing
Right.
out of that
Nice.
base station
Yeah.
in Tenma.
What I really, really love about your stories, John, is that wherever you go or wherever you set a facility, it could be your brewery facility or it could be a tap room, you always go into the network. You create the network within the community of that area. And this is one thing that many, actually, let's say business students have learned about Japanese companies, that they work for the local community first and the employees first, and they know that if the employees of the company and the local community are happy, then the business will persist. And even though what is really wonderful I see is that even though you and your partner or partners are not local Japanese businessmen, you still follow this model, and it seems to have worked for you, because I see that this was the case back in the back in time in Bulgaria, but I see that this model is gradually being replaced by something which is not so favorable for the local community and the employees in European countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really admire what you're doing and the way you're doing business here, because I believe that this is the best way to have sustainable business.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
let me sneak in another, and then I'll please answer. I also feel like you haven't really come out and said it, but you seem to have a long-term outlook, not a make a killing right now. And that works as well because that fits the model Maya's talking about of what it's very Japanese. Like if you contribute to the community, if you add to the community, they will give back to you and you will sustain. That's how I would summarize it. So your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the original, Brian has never said this, but in discussions with him, as he was dreaming about this brewery over 25 years ago, it really, his problem, his opportunity was a love for Japan and a love for beer. And how do you make that work? And this is really the product of that. And so I do think that wherever you are, if we were doing this in the States or someplace else, that the attention to our local community would be natural. But for us being in Japan, it really is because we love this country. We love being here. And so I think that does inform, kind of how we, develop our business, how we, the culture we've built at the company, how we try to, be good members of the community.
Well, it comes through. I can feel it.
Yes, I can feel it too. And it's wonderful to feel it, actually. And also, you mentioned that, well, you also sell through other channels. Of course, you do, you have your tap rooms, but sometimes you do oroshi as well. And what other places can people find your beers at?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just by way of contrast, in the States where we're from, there's something called the three-tier system. And this was the regulatory system that resulted after prohibition was lifted last century. For a while, for 13 years, I think, you couldn't drink alcohol, and that led to all kinds of problems. So that was repealed. I believe it was the 21st Amendment to the Constitution. But what resulted from it was the three-tier system where you can be a brewer or a wholesaler or a retailer, but you may not participate in 2 or 3 tiers. You can only participate in one. And this is being interpreted to various degrees of rigor depending on the state in America. Japan has no 3-tier system, so we are able to participate in all 3 tiers.
Gotcha.
Brewer, wholesaling, retailing. And we do that. And it's complicated somewhat because, you could say, well, you don't want to have channel conflict. You don't want to compete with your customers. But we're small enough, and the industry still is small enough, such that if a customer wants to buy from us directly, we will absolutely say yes to that. And in fact, we have a small sales team, 2 folks in Tokyo, 1 in Nagoya, 1 in Osaka. And 3 of those 4 also work in tap rooms, but part-time or out in the field. And they are working either with individual establishments, your local pizza restaurant or izakaya, or they're working with mom and pop liquor shops, sakeya, or they're working with what's called gyomu oroshi saketen. And these are businesses that often can get quite large. Our largest customer has over 100 oku yen in annual revenue. And they serve restaurants. So they go to restaurants with all manner, wine, sake, beer. So we try very hard to work with them, to have good relationships, to support them, to be responsive. And then there's some national scale tonya that serves supermarkets and, big retail formats. And we're sort of less, successful in that chain than in that channel than we would like to be. We'd like to be in more supermarkets all over the country. But one of the trade-offs that we've confront and have accepted is that because of the way we make beer, we really, really, really want it to be refrigerated throughout the chain. So from brewery really to the drinker's lips, we want that to be a cold chain. And often when you get into the bigger channels, it's beer that can be, they demand, and for good reason, they demand that beer be transported at room temperature, and that it can be stored even in the heat of summer at room, in a warehouse, often above room temperature.
Right.
So this is pasteurized beer that's, manufactured in such a way that it can be handled in that way and distributed in that way and meet a mass, consumer audience. Our beer is a little bit more handcrafted. It's, for starters, unfiltered. So there's yeast, these wonderful single-celled
That's the
organisms
beauty of it. Yes. Yeah.
still in the beer. Good for your
gut microbe,
your microbiome,
your
My,
bio.
chock full
yes.
of B vitamins.
That's
Yeah.
a reason to drink.
And then
Yeah.
when the beer is put into a bottle or keg, it's not unlike other breweries. It's not a finished product. It needs to go into what we call the warm fridge, a 20°C room for between a week and several months, depending on the beer. And in there, it re-ferments.
Gotcha.
And just like champagne, in a way.
Huh.
And the goal there is to create natural carbonation. So we don't force carbonate our beer. It's unfiltered, secondarily fermented and packaged. And it just, all beer really, but especially beer like this, really, really benefits from a cold chain distribution. And so one of the challenges we confront in the marketplace is saying, we want to deliver it to you, and we want it to be stored in cool conditions and served. And so that does limit our footprint a little bit in reaching a mass audience. But you will occasionally find Baird beers at supermarkets in the Tokyo area. The one that's most consistent, and in Osaka as well, is Seijoishi.
Right.
They usually have two of our beers, the Rising Sun Pale Ale.
They're so good because they carry stuff like that.
Yeah. I also have to say that the Life supermarket stores, they have it too, because we have one in our neighborhood and it's there. So
yep. We're
yes.
very grateful for the Life relationship. That's a big format, lots of stores, lots of shoppers, and that's what you want. You just want foot traffic, so that magically people see the product, and 1 out of 100 of them, or 1 out of 200, will be curious and pick up a bottle. And I think our batting average is pretty good once people try the beer. So really our challenge and our opportunity is getting more trial.
Yeah.
So if I wander into your tap room and it's a hot summer day and I'm really sweating, right off the top of your head, what's the most refreshing brew I could order in that situation?
Wow, very good question. And what's wonderful is that there's a diversity of answers. I think at this time of year, a real less than 1 in 1,000 answer would be one of our big winter beers, which you can still find here and there, like a barley wine or a wheat wine. These are rich, chewy, 10 or 11% alcohol winter warmers. Yeah. So some people still go for these in the summer, but more likely you're going to have your thirst quenched most enjoyably by our summer seasonal Cool Breeze Pils. Most of the world's beer.
That's a Pilsner?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I was about to tell you, I don't know the beer brewing process very well, but for whatever reason, I gravitate toward lagers and Pilsners. I really like Pilsners. I don't know why, though. Can you maybe explain to me why I like it?
Well, you're not alone, Tim. The world, I would say 90, even with craft beer really accelerating globally over the last 20 to 30 years, my guess is that 90% of world beer production is a Pilsner style lager. And so I don't know the history of this in deep detail, but this was an innovation, I believe, in the 1800s, where suddenly you had a clear, light beer.
Right.
And it really, really took off and captured consumer interest and brewers' interest globally. So the beers that Asahi and Suntory, Sapporo make are all Pilsner style lagers. This is true of Heineken and Amstel and Budweiser and in Singapore Tiger beer. So the global beer is Pilsner style. We actually don't brew this Cool Breeze Pils all year round. We treat it as a seasonal beer, and because it is crisp and refreshing, a little hoppy, more so.
I like a little. I like it.
Yeah. So that's a lovely. I was fortunate through a customer in Takarazuka near Kobe to be introduced to a group last week, the weekend before last. This guy named Rick and all his buddies, a lot of whom are in motorsports, and they have what's now become formalized as the Rick Fest in Shimoda every year.
Nice.
And so
my friends live in Shimoda, by the way, my musician friends. So
beautiful place. Yeah. And they usually drain the beer shelf at the 7-Eleven across from Shirahama Beach. But my friend said, "Hey Rick, why don't the Bear Brewing is right there on the peninsula? Why don't you work with them?" So I got the beer server and a couple of kegs and a some cases of bottles and put it in the little van at the brewery and drove down and spent the weekend with Rick and his friends. And yeah, I served under their tent on the beach, Cool Breeze Pills on a hot,
Nice.
sunny summer day. And it
Oh,
was,
that's perfect. I love
Yeah.
Shimoda. It
man,
reminds
it
me of
was so
Hawaii.
popular.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that place. Yeah,
And
Oh, it was
Shiratori's so
great.
nice.
yes, listening to this now, this part of the conversation, I also remember that when I was talking with you at the tap room, John, and I was thinking, so at least the tap room we met in, I think it was Gutanda, right?
No, that was Nakameguro.
That was Nakameguro. Why do I
Yeah.
remember Gutanda? Well, okay, forgive me, but Nakameguro, the tap room was amazing to me because I thought that it was the perfect place, to organize parties and to organize events there, and at the same time, have snacks, but also enjoy all those different types of beer. And so I can see the pictures you shared with us here. There are so many people in this tap room,
Oh,
and I
Yeah.
wonder, is this an event or is this just the regular
a busy
clientele
night.
you have? Yes, a busy night at the tap room. Because I thought, at that time, and I definitely wanted, to have something, an event there, and invite friends, invite family, and just have fun. And I wondered, I didn't ask you back then because we talked about so many different things. But do you also organize events in those tap rooms?
Kashkiri.
We
Kashikiri.
do, yeah. And this is a photo of an event. We've collaborated a couple of times with a really dynamic musical organization group called More Than Music, which is based in Tokyo, and they do live music primarily in the Tokyo area, sometimes further afield. And what we did a few times last year was a pizza party. And I believe this is a photograph of one of the pizza parties where they had live music uh, and also a DJ. So really wonderful musicians. I mean, just a small ensemble. The place can only fit about 65 people, and then a DJ to play while the musicians were taking a break. And then folks just get beers and pizza, and as you can see here, and this is why we love owning pubs and operating pubs, is that just meeting each other, talking, making friendships. That's really the historical role of the pub in society, and we love doing that. So, and then getting back to your question, Maya, we do host events and kashikiri parties and stuff like that. So we've done a lot for alumni groups, so universities, primarily from the States, but they have dozens or hundreds of alumni in Japan, and they have holiday parties and get-togethers and speakers, and so we've become a little bit known in that community, and we use the tap room for that. Music. We were able to screen a couple of movies last year, made on a small scale, but really superb films. One was called Shea no Hosoku. It was a friend of mine through one of these university networks, and she was the director and main actor in this movie about a share house in Tokyo, and just a beautiful story. And then the lead actor, co-lead with her, he ended up doing a little sequel to it, just a 10-minute film. But all 60 people came back to that, and for his screening and his discussion of the epilogue to it.
Yeah.
And again, it's just, we screened the movie. We took down this artwork and screened it on the white wall, and it worked really well. And then they had a microphone, and they took questions, in this case from these film enthusiasts who were really interested in their work. One night we did recently a charity fundraiser for Asia Women's University. Gary Bremerman, who was on
All
this
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
on your
yeah,
podcast,
Gary.
that was
Yeah.
I saw him there and
nice.
reconnected. And that was a wonderful event. It was a quiz night. So I was on Gary's team, and
Cool.
we did, we didn't win, but we had a ball, and they raised money for this wonderful university. I believe it's in Thailand, that supports women who's otherwise would not be able to get a university education. So all sorts of events we're able to host, and it's a lot of fun doing so.
And yeah, what is wonderful. Basically, I didn't know that the name pub came from a public house until very recently, when I actually started watching a British, classical British sitcom. And then that's when I realized that pub means public house, and that's where people in the past used to really socialize, go there to meet friends and to talk while enjoying beer. And well, also, I wanted to ask you one thing, because when we met in Nakameguro, so you told me a lot about the beers available there, and you also have shared a picture with me here about the beers and how many taps you have, how many beers you have. So, what is the average number of beers you offer in your tap rooms?
It varies between taproom just because of the space we were able to rent and build in. These taps are from Bashamichi Taproom in Yokohama, and along with Nakameguro is the most, and the brewery itself in Shuzenji is the most. So this is something like 20 taps.
Mm-hmm.
And on those taps, we would have always our 12 year-round beers. We make those all the time, all year. And then the remaining taps, depending,
Seasonal.
would be filled by seasonal beers.
Gotcha. Wow.
And we do
You guys are
28
busy.
seasonal beers a year.
Wow.
That's
A
that's
lot
a
of
very
work.
good number.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and really the mission is to showcase, and that I think most craft brewers would agree that part of our role in the brewing world is to showcase diversity. We have a ton of respect for the big brewers like a Kirin or an Asahi, and for what they do, and the consistency with which, say, a super dry or a Kirin Ichiban Shibori is made throughout the year. Every year in, year out, the taste is always the same. But if that's all you have,
Right.
that's really kind of sad. And for a while, that's all Japan did have. And even today, craft beer is not even 2% of the market.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of road to travel in sharing the diversity and history of beer. And just on these taps, and in our brewery, we use 3 different yeasts: a Scottish ale yeast, a lager yeast, and a Belgian yeast. And just from those different yeast strains, you get tremendous flavor variety. And then you can use different colored malts, different roasts of malts, different combinations of hops, and often fruit. We grow fruit around the brewery to just make it, a great variety of beer. And we love the British brewing tradition. This other photograph next to the taps, the single glass, is a glass of real ale being poured. So this is a distinctive, British tradition. Also unfiltered and secondarily fermented is the definition of real ale. And then you serve it near room temperature. So it's a bit of an acquired taste. But once you start drinking real ales, most people really, really appreciate them. So we love the British tradition. We love, stout from Ireland. We love the Belgian tradition and brew a few Belgian beers. Germany, obviously. Beer, Taikoku, super, so we just, and then so much has happened in American craft brewing that has also been inspiring to us. And we get to showcase that by having all of these taps.
I don't think I've ever had a Belgian beer that I didn't like. I'm not sure. Is it the brewing process? Is it the hops? Is it all of it? All of the above? What makes them so good?
I don't know. One thing that they do that we do for certain of our beers is, especially higher alcohol. So a lot of, if one can generalize, and it's always dangerous to do so, so Belgian beers would be higher in alcohol and a little sweeter.
Oh,
And
that
so,
might
and
be
the
it.
sweetness makes them really dangerous. So,
Yeah, right.
like one beer that we revere, and we actually have a homage to it, our own version, is Duvel, which
That's the
means
popular one.
devil, I think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a golden ale, and it's 8.5% alcohol. And you drink it, and you're like, oh, this is so refreshing. It's a little sweet, and it was, that was so drinkable. I want another one.
Yeah, right.
And you can get into trouble really, really quickly
Yeah.
with a lot of Belgian beers. But they use, for these higher alcohol beers, they often use candy sugar as well as malts,
I
which
see.
we do. We have sugar from Amami Oshima,
I see.
and we prime. So for some of our higher alcohol beers, up to 15% of the grist, the material that you're going to begin the brew with, is not grain. It's sugar. And the reason you do that is because sugar ferments through 100% straight to alcohol. So you can brew a beer that's dry, lighter in body, but high in alcohol. And that's something that we've adopted from Belgian style.
Interesting.
Yeah. John, I think that since we started this, going into this direction, we could talk for another hour or two. Or,
We're already over. I'm having so much fun. I
yes,
didn't even realize it. We're 10 minutes past.
yes, but I would love to have you once again, and then we can talk about the different types of beer you brew and also the traditions behind them, if you don't mind, of course, if you have time.
Yeah,
Because
love to. And
my friend,
perhaps I can get my buddy Brian to come on and
oh,
Oh, that'd be great.
that will be
speak as
great.
well.
Yeah.
So much of this is really his
Mhm.
vision and creativity and body of work.
Yeah. We
If you
would
ever
love
make
to
it
have
out
you.
to Atami, give me a holler. I want you,
I
I'd like to meet
will.
in person.
Yeah, I used to live in the neighborhood. I mean, I was in Numazu, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just moved a couple weeks ago to Saitama. So we're in the
not
Tokyo
far
region
away.
now.
Right. Yeah.
We wanted to be closer to family, my wife's parents, and
Completely
be
understand.
with them.
That's
Yeah.
why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on today. This was great. I really enjoyed it. And again, I hope we can continue the conversation in a future podcast. And so
Thank
again,
you.
thank you.
It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. And before this podcast, we've also had a couple of chances to get together, and I've just so enjoyed our conversations.
All right.
So thank you
The
for
feeling is
having me.
mutual. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's continue them, these conversations. Let's keep them going.
Thanks.
Thank
Cheers.
you,
Yeah.
everybody, for hanging with us.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Well, we will continue the conversation. Now we got the yes from John. Hopefully, we'll have Brian on online too at some point.
Yeah.
And yes, to everybody who stayed with us, thanks a lot for your time. It's Wednesday morning, July 9th, and we wish you a happy and productive midweek and also a very nice reminder of the week as well. We'll see you next time. So have a good day and all the best for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.